Morning, friends. Today we'll be talking on another very interesting topic, tips for doing a total hip replacement in ankylosing spondylitis. This is your friend Vaibhav, and in today's talk, we are going to look at the clinical and radiological aspect of angspond, the anesthesia and positioning, how to expose it, how to take a neck cut, what about acetabular reaming, how do we place accurately our acetabular and femoral component, and we'll also touch upon the post-operative and rehabilitation aspects. So a word about diagnosing ankylosing spondylitis. We use the modified New York classification criteria for ankylosing spondylitis, in which we have got a clinical component and a radiological component. So the clinical component includes low back pain, stiffness for more than 3 months that improves with exercise but not with rest, limitation of lumbar spine mobility in both sagittal and frontal planes, and limitation in chest expansion. Whereas the radiological component includes the unilateral sacroiliitis of grade 3 or 4 or bilateral sacroiliitis more than 2. A definitive diagnosis of angspond is made if the radiological criteria is associated with at least one clinical component. And you can give a provisional diagnosis of angspond if the three clinical components are present or if only a single radiological component is present. Clinical examination is very important in doing these cases. Before you plan to undertake these cases, we must remember that some deformities are better understood clinically than they are radiologically. So you must look for deformities in both sagittal, coronal and rotational plane. You must check for the range of movement at different joints. It is very important to inspect spine, both lumbar spine as well as the cervical spine, and measure for true and apparent shortening. So first and foremost, you look at the position of limb, whether it is in abduction, adduction and rotation. You look at the pelvic obliquity and the SI joint fusion. Then when you look at the x-rays, you look at the femoral canal, protrusio, quality of fusion, bone quality. So this is the clinical picture here. You look, the limb is clearly in abduction and flexion, and you will see also that there is some amount of external rotation here. Now if you go to the x-rays, the x-rays will give you a lot of idea of how the limb position is, what is the state of fusion, whether it is completely fused, are the trabeculae crossing each other, are there any cysts that need to be considered, or impaction bone grafting needs to be done, what is the neck length. It will also give you some idea of how to approach to the osteotomy. Now CT scan is a great help in these times, especially for these complicated cases. It tells you about the bone stock. So what issues you look at is bone stock, the medial wall. As I said, in X-ray also you should look for trabecular continuity or the type of fusion that is there, and of course the femoral canal diameter. Now this is the CT of a patient, the same patient that you saw. And you can see the cysts that are present. There are few trabeculae which are crossing. So an initial impression is that it will be very difficult to get this head dislocated unless you do an osteotomy. So you can look at the cysts here at this portion here. There are all the cysts. These are a few trabeculae which are crossing each other. Similarly, in an axial plane, it is important to have a look at what is the status. Now, if you look at this axial plane, this is very interesting because you see that almost this much space is non-fused space, and the fusion is happening here. So it gives you an idea where to enter in case you find a completely fused hip, and how to go about doing a acetabular preparation. It tells you about the wall, what is the strength of the medial wall, how are your columns. The lumbar spine x-rays, both AP and lateral, are important. Now there are quite a bit of complicated measurement that you can make here, but there are two simple things to start with what you should look at. Whether there is a scoliosis and what is the status of the lumbar curve. Is there a exaggerated lumbar lordosis, or the lumbar lordosis is decreased? Is there a pseudokyphotic deformity? So as I said, there are a lot of measurement, but just remember, if there is a flexion deformity at the lumbar spine, that is, there is a decreased lordosis, you have to reduce the anteversion of the cup. If there is an extension deformity or an increased lordosis, then you increase the anteversion. If there is a scoliotic deformity, try to close your cup. It is important also to do a cervical spine x-rays, because in case you require endotracheal tube placement, the anesthetist should know what is the status of the cervical spine and most of the cases will be done with a fiber optic tube. Templating for any hip replacement is important, but remember that the templating in this case may not be completely accurate because of the rotation and obliquity that is there. Also remember that the femoral size can be extremely misleading, so that in sometimes you will feel that the canal is so wide that even a dorsey is there, and these are the stems, these are the canals which may not even accumulate or accommodate the smallest cemented stem. They may also indicate that there are differences between the proximal and the distal femur, and there is altered proximal femoral morphology, and in such cases perhaps a modular implant may be important, maybe should be kept for the case. Pre-operatively standard thing, this is a good protocol that I find to do between pre-operative, intraoperative and post-operative things, where you take each of these issues and try to optimize the patient for a better outcome. As I said, there are a lot of anesthesia concerns in these cases. You can anticipate a difficult spinal. Always an awake fiber optic intubation should be standby. These people have a decreased chest expansion, so decreased tidal volume, and the anesthetist will take care of that, of course. And there is a 30% incidence of AV block or right bundle branch block in these patients. You must preoperatively arrange blood products because the blood, there can be more blood loss, and all the blood conservation strategies that you can apply should be applied. Positioning can be a challenging aspect of the surgery. It is done in lateral decupitous with sacral and pubic support. Commonest deformities are flexion, abduction, and external rotation, as you saw in that last case. Remember that the bilateral deformities are not uncommon. You must ensure adequate padding. There has to be multiple pillows or headring for cervical spine stiffness. Before you start, you should ensure that your table can be tilted, because sometimes when the head is fused, you may require head tilt to access the posterior area. You should have an image intensifier, and standard timeout techniques used with Trenexa injection, antibiotics, and reconfirming the availability of blood products is recommended. Now coming to the actual surgery, if you break down your surgery into small parts, your execution will be quicker and you will not face much of difficulty. So your first step is having a good exposure, the second is removing the head, third is preparing the acetabulum, and fourth is preparing the femur. So let's look step by step what are the key points in ankylosing spondylitis when you expose it. So what's the difference? Apart from your standard exposure, you should release Gmax here, because if you've got a fused spine or if you've got a very stiff hip, then you will need all kind of releases, and Gmax is one of the simplest release and which can be repaired, and this is how and that is what you should be doing. You may require, in very cases when you find that the overstress is positive, you may require to do a fractional lengthening of TFL or a W-shaped release. Once you have done the releases and you've cut, again at this stage, to reach the posterior aspect, you may tilt the table forward, because you will not be able to rotate. So if the spine is fused, you will not be able to rotate. So the only way to reach to the posterior aspect and cut the rotators and capsule in one go would be to rotate the table away from you or forward. Once you have done that, one of the most critical step is to identify the head acetabulum junction. So no matter how much or what's the degree of fusion, if you are careful enough, you will be able to identify this junction, and this will be very helpful when you prepare the acetabulum. Remove the labrum to delineate your acetabulum properly. As I said, complete visualization of neck and soft tissue release is the key. If the hip is in too much of an external rotation, you may have to use a dual approach. That means that once you have exposed posteriorly, you have to tilt the table back towards you and go anteriorly. So this is a picture of release of the Gmax. You can see that once you have, this is the greater trochanter, this is the head end, this is the foot end, and you are just gently releasing the gluteus maximus. As I said, in most cases you will be able to identify the capsulolabral junction, and we'll see one is the shape. So if you see, it is rising above here and this is dipping here. There is a thin line of labrum here which can be identified, and this is the capsular tissue. Similarly, intraoperatively, you see this is the labrum here, this is the head, and this is the the posterior wall. As I said, in case of external rotation, the posterior structure like capsule rotator are contractor. Remember that the flexion deformity of hip puts the sciatic nerve at risk, and in certain cases, the trochanteric osteotomy is the only way forward. Tilting the table forward and backward is a great tool. Your patient should be strapped, your table should be good, and you should know how to use this to your maximum advantage. If the head is completely fused, you need to do osteotomy. It's called as wafer osteotomy. Do not damage the abductor. Ensure that when you're doing an osteotomy, it does not extend to the greater trochanter or the acetabular wall. Use a combination of saw and osteotome. So what I do is I make a mark with the saw and then gently feel and divide with osteotome. Ensure that there is no bone splintering and it's a clean, nice cut. So you see, that's the junction you have identified. Typically, that's the neck area you'll see, and this is the osteotomy that is typically done. It's a good idea to mark your osteotomy before you actually do. This is how an in situ osteotomy is performed. You remove the wafer after using the osteotome to complete the osteotomy, and then once that's there, you mobilize the femur. You see, I've translocated the femur anteriorly to kind of come to this thing. Now, when you start reaming, you of course have to retract the femur anteriorly with the swan neck. Use 2 steering bead to improve exposure to give you a complete 360-degree exposure of the acetabulum. Look for circumferential labrum that gives an idea of the direction of reaming. Remember that the first reamer set the tone, so be careful. The subsequent reaming has to be done patiently till the floor is reached. The true floor can be identified. If you look for the fat pad, there is always an unossified ligamentum teres. And if you are in doubt, it's a good idea to pass a 2.5 mm drill and then use a depth gauge to feel how much of your wall is remaining. When in doubt, be slow. That's the in situ reaming, and you'll see that the acetabular labral junction, the capsulolabral junction is giving me a direction of where we are heading. You have to be aware of the pelvic obliquity, and you see how the position of the opposite limb also affects your cup positioning or your reaming positioning. Similarly, it is important to think about the pelvic tilt, and you will see in this example when you are reaming, this is a neutral pelvis. The moment you've got a flexion deformity, this is how it looks. So you will have a tendency to open the cup. Similarly, if the pelvis is extended, you will close the cup. This can be easily demonstrated in this figure here, where if you see, this is the A is the normal thing. The moment there is the hip changes its direction, your cup will go open. And to ensure that it is well aligned, you will have to take care that your landmarks are properly accounted for. Similarly, here if you look, the cup you are tending to close if the pelvis is extended. Now, there are different thoughts on cup positioning. The Widmer et al. Said the cup inclination should be between 40 and 42, and the combined anteversion of acetabulum and femur should be 37. Ranawat has suggested it to be 25 to 35 in males and 35 to 45 in females. Now, for us, I think the most important thing that you can do to judge your cup is the tal. As a guide, our inferior aspect of the cup should be parallel to the tal. So here if you look, my inferior edge is medial to the tal, and this diagram from Larry Dorr is very informative. So if you look at correct coverage of the cup, it has to be at the level of tal. So if you see the tal is here, the cup has just gone slightly medial to it. There has to be 2 to 3 millimeter uncovering if possible of posterior superior direction of the cup. There has to be narrow edge of bone anterosuperiorly, and that the cup should not overhang anteriorly. That means that the anterior wall can be seen. So this will prevent the impingement of iliopsoas. This will suggest your version is correct. The positioning here these two positioning will suggest that our inclination is correct. Coming to the femoral component, the anteversion ranges from 17 to 30 degree. Concept of combined anteversion is important. As I have stated earlier, that the templating may not be 100% accurate. In certain cases, as I said, the canal can be so narrow that you may require reaming before rasping, and in younger patients, the mantra is to preserve the bone. When you are creating this, remember to go posterolateral if you're using the posterior approach. Calcar is a good clue to your version. Palpate the epicondyles, and remember when you have rasped, when you put the neck, it is easier to judge the version when with the neck on. It is a good idea to take a intraoperative C-arm, and you'll see here that there are a few things that you must notice, that whether it is at the level of the teardrop, how far have you gone medially, have you put the cup in the appropriate, seated the cup in the appropriate thing, is the cup closed enough, and you can see that there is 2 to 3 millimeter of overhanging on posterior aspect, which I like. The length, there is probably a 0.25 centimeter lengthening, but that's good enough. You'll see that I've seated the stem enough. Is this good? The stem seems to be in little varus than I would have expected. An important thing to note here is that it appears that the stem is undersized, but we had to ream to even get this stem in, which is the case in most femoral canal. This is a basic algorithm of how to alter the positioning of your component depending on what you face. And if you look, the combined anteversion, the anatomical alignment in respect to the tal, taking in consideration pelvic tilt, and the lumbopelvic kinematic adjusted alignment should be considered when you are putting the cup. So you have to think 3D when you are putting this, and take into account not only the acetabulum but also the entire pelvis and the lumbosacral spine for an accurate placement. Limb length restoration is an important thing. A simple way to judge it is that on full extension, your lesser trochanter should be at least 1 finger breadth below the ischium. If that's the case, then most of the time your limb length seems to be okay. Remember when you are closing that all the posterior structure may not be available for a tight posterior closure. In these cases, the quadratus femoris is severe, and a sleeve of this can be translocated entirely to cover the entire capsule. Remember to do an erector tenotomy in case you feel that there is an erector tendency to adduct the hip. The suction drain can be used only if we use it only if there is significant oozing intraoperatively. Ankylosing spondylitis are notorious for heterotrophic ossification. So a few simple things can prevent that. One is copious wash. At least 3-liter wash throughout the surgery should have been given to clear the soft tissue of any bone debris. You must counsel your team about need to respect the soft tissue and avoid overzealous retraction. Use new fresh blade for that's for both your surgery as well as your osteotomies, so that there is no bone splintering. Ensure that there is no periosteal stripping. One area where people tend to really do that stripping is while placing the Steinmann pin for the acetabular exposure. So it's a good idea not to do stripping there. Indomethacin for 25 to 75 milligram, if creatinine is okay, can be given for 3 weeks. The results have been uniformly good, not as good as a normal primary THR, but good enough. And in my opinion and in my practice, I've seen that these are the most happiest patients, because you started from a point where they were really sick of their condition, and you've given them this joint, and they are the most grateful patient. So one of my patients whom I did around 17 years back still sends me good farm fresh products from his farm, because they are the happiest ones, in short. So what is the take home message? So if you look, a good pre-op workup and planning is essential. You should have an adequate exposure and releases before you start with your bone things. Neck cut without splintering and damage to walls and abductors is very important. You must aim to restore the biomechanics of hip. Identify the true acetabulum, restore the acetabular center, correctly place acetabular and femoral component in their native anatomical position. And last but not least, think 3-dimensionally. It's very crucial for us to not only think in acetabulum or femoral terms, but the entire pelvis, lumbar spine, and the soft tissue structures. I thank you for your attention, and welcome any questions that you may have on this subject. Thank you.